And welcome to an episode of QI that's all about inventions and discoveries. In fact, anything that's just the job. They say that the greatest of all inventors is accident. With that in mind, let's meet the tremendously timely Jason Manford. The consistently coincidental Jeremy Clarkson. The stupefyingly serendipitous Sandy Toxwig. And an accident waiting to happen, Alan Davies. So, let's hear your Alexander Graham Bells. Jason goes. Jeremy goes.
Is it going to be a car horn?
No, surprising. Sandy goes.
I want something trim.
Yeah. Yes. And Alan goes. I can listen to it forever.
He loves this one.
It's a 14-and-a-half hour. It's a Wagner ringtone. Isn't that wonderful? I could listen to that forever. Anyway, so let's begin with an interesting question. What were chainsaws originally invented for?
Proctology.
Wow. That's scary.
Yeah, that's a...
Slicing an arse in half.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you were in the right area, I have to say.
What?
I mean,
Really?
well,
Circumcision.
What I mean is, you began straight away with medicine. You didn't say trees or, you know, cutting down
cutting off legs.
buildings.
Like bones and
Bones is the right answer. Yes, in particular, it was a rather unpleasant procedure. It was
don't. It'll be a boy thing against a girl thing. It
well,
will
not
be.
against, you know.
Well, no,
it's doctors trying to help.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. It'll be a boy thinking a woman's taking far too long over labour, going, oh, I can't stand all that panting. I know, we'll get a chainsaw, just cut that baby out. That's what it is.
You know, you're absolutely right. It was in 1783.
That's no excuse.
It was two Scots doctors called John Aitken and James Jaffrey, and it was called a symphysiotomy, and it was a procedure to widen the pelvis if the baby's head was too large to pass through.
Oh, can you hear the high tone of all those sighs?
About this picture.
It's a bit eye-watering.
It's a ladies' ward, so of course there is some baking going on.
Yes.
On the left. Cake display cakes.
And I tell you what,
buns in the oven, Stephen. You see what I did there?
In the oven.
they didn't really, darling.
I'm afraid they did. When I say chainsaw, it was literally a chain. It was like a watch chain, in fact.
Right.
It was like an up and down.
lumberjack giving it. It's a boy!
They hadn't yet invented the internal combustion engine.
And caesarean sections.
Caesarean sections have replaced the same idea.
Phew.
Yes, quite, exactly.
It's
It's a bit of a
To do
relief.
the caesarean section, I think. Sawing the pelvic bone in half is not as easy as maybe just a small incision and...
But is there
I
not
know,
like-
you'd have thought they would have
Pop
made
it out the sunroof.
But this was before antiseptic. It was before antiseptic surgery, and of course it was before any kind of anaesthetic.
They're not a meeting. You know what I mean? There's not a meeting where someone goes, I've got it. And they go, what? They go, chainsaw, innit?
Well, they looked at a watch chain and they said, you know, if we could sort of ease away the bone like that, rather than using a saw. I know, everyone's wincing.
Have we got another question that isn't about that?
Would it heal? Presumably not very well.
Well, they then went on to use the same thing. For example, if someone had a bit of diseased bone, they would do the same thing. They would sort of tick it in, they'd go up and down like that, and then they'd do it lower down, and the two bits would fuse together and have a stiff arm. But it would get rid of the diseased bone. It was called an osteotome. It eventually became like a chainsaw. You can see one here.
My God.
That is more like a chainsaw.
You don't
Pretty
want
unpleasant.
That, you don't want that coming at you.
You really don't.
No.
You really, really don't.
I remember my wife had a baby, I remember it well.
I'm
And,
just saying.
yeah, it was a
wouldn't
grand day.
forget.
It was a grand day. But when she had a baby, and there's a point where you go in to see the fella who's going to sort it out on the day.
Obstetrician?
That's
Yes.
him, yeah.
Yeah.
He's got an official title. And you go in to see him, and as the husband, he says, right, you sit there on a chair, and then they he pulls the curtain across while him and your wife are in this thing, while he has a little dabble or whatever he's doing.
It's a bit intimate, isn't it?
It's a bit like you go, I've seen it, mate. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing... This is why we're here.
Well, you don't look when that happens, though, do you, at the moment of conception? Do you actually have a look? You're looking into... Surely. Sorry.
Stephen doesn't need to know, Jason. He doesn't need to know.
You're gazing lovingly into her eyes.
Gazing lovingly at the Born Identity, which is still on the television. As you reach for your drink.
What do you think, darling, that he's got a periscope at the moment?
I'm sorry.
I don't know why you and I are having this conversation.
After the invention of the internal combustion engine, where we were getting Jeremy to his home territory now, eventually by 1920 they were small enough to be able to have a hand-powered
cut down trees.
And then they cut down trees,
Yes.
exactly. Well, anyway, there you are. Chainsaws were originally invented for midwives. Staying in that general area, unfortunately, explain how an electric jockstrap works.
Is there going to be a demonstration?
Do you know, I kind of wish there were.
Is that what this is?
No.
That's what it's...
Is it a warming thing or...
And an electric anything takes us into a period
Galvanism.
of time.
It's Victorian galvanism.
Exactly. Everybody thought that electricity would cure everything, stimulate everything, and achieve everything. And so at the back of every newspaper there was an electrical something, a galvanic bath. But these were electric jockstraps. And
Well, presumably, because they had all sorts of things to stop boys playing with themselves, must have been... It would stop you, wouldn't it? It would stop you, wouldn't it? If you were shocking your pants?
I think it might be nice.
yes,
Oh, really?
you're spot on. We men know that. Because there are certain code words in Victorian English. Nervous and general debility, lost vigour, decline and the whole train of gloomy attendants was standard code for impotence. Enter the Heidelberg electric belt. There it is.
It's a bit high up, isn't it? Oh,
Yes.
see this thing down there.
No, that's really kind of buzzing away in the important area. And that is actually going to cause you to... well, I'm afraid the phrase is pretty embarrassing. They advise seminal economy. They're advising
Is that
against...
with EasyJet?
Yeah. They're advising against wantonly jettisoning too much nervous substance. Basically,
Is that what they called it?
that's code for semen. In other words, it's essentially a sex
Wantonly
toy.
jettisoning.
Don't wantonly jettison your nervous substance.
I like the idea of nervous semen just coming out going...
Whoa!
He's quite camp. Perhaps he's having problems with his virility because he's sleeping with the wrong sex.
Well, it might be that. But that genuinely was an item, as you can see, hugely advertised. There are lots of different...
So is it designed then to lift the dormant chap or to denervify the semen?
It's basically designed saying, would you like to enjoy the experience of a little bit of a tingling down there that maybe has disappeared, or probably it was just like, that's a damn good thing to take to a hotel room.
Why have they gone out of fashion?
I know. I feel like if Ann Summers did them, you could see it, not in the upstairs bit, the downstairs bit of Ann Summers, you know, like...
Tell me about this, Jason, because
Well, upstairs is
yes.
like, just like Chocolate Willies and that. Downstairs, someone's going to get hurt, Stephen.
Really? I've never been in an Ann Summers. That's weird. You think it'd be the other way around. You'd have to go upstairs in order to...
No, you come in at, like, ground floor level. I mean, only going off our nearest 12 branches.
Yes, right.
But yeah, that's the normal one. Then you sort of pop downstairs, you know, anniversary or whatever, you pop downstairs and...
But the other thing about that is you've got 10 days free trial.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see it. It is
What
actually...
if you send it back and it goes to somebody else? That's what I'm worried about with the free trial.
I know, exactly. You're
that was
using a
cheap,
used one.
Yeah.
It is going to get much more acceptable and decent, this programme, I promise you, as we move along. So, anyway, what was your great-grandmother doing down the back of the sofa?
Was she a borrower?
Was she a borrower? No, borrower.
I come from a particularly small family, and we lost many various reasons. I had an aunt went through a cane chair. We never saw her again.
Was she dead and been cremated and you spilt it?
What was happening around the time of one's great-grandmother? What sort of...
They were using the elderly to stuff sofas.
About 100 years ago, families began to do a thing in order to register their lives and formalise their existences after
Photographs.
weddings.
So photographs.
Exactly.
So Victorian.
And particularly their babies. They like to have their babies photographed. But exposure times were quite long. And how do you keep a baby still?
Oh, I've seen this. This is this weird thing.
Heroin.
There's loads of pictures. And they've got like sheets over their head.
Yes.
They're sort of holding the child in place.
Exactly. They're called hidden mother photographs.
They're
And
terrifying. There's a website of them.
Yes.
And they're terrifying. Yes. Oh, wow. It's horrible.
It's like a woman in a burqa.
That's horrible.
There's the mother pretending to be a sofa or an item of furniture, keeping her baby quiet and still enough for the exposure time of the photograph. We got another one where the mother looks a bit like a carpet. I mean, it's really... It's not
even a baby.
I know, it's not even it's a young girl. There is a whole class of these. And
Don't move, bitch, don't move.
You would definitely get the points there for having known about them.
It's terrifying.
Rather peculiar.
Brilliant. There's hundreds of... And they're all sinister. Like, you've gone... Rather than just let the kid stand by itself, you've gone, go stand with that ghost.
Yes.
Well, you know, it's weird.
Well, the mother will be talking to the child, saying,
Yes.
it's all right, darling,
Good.
sit still. I'm going to hold
It is talking!
I am the sofa.
We have for you probably the first ever photograph of a human being, which is rather exciting. It's from the 1840s, and it's by Louis Daguerre himself. He took a photograph. In those days, very long exposure, and all the people who were there would have moved through as a blur. You wouldn't have seen. But there is a boot boy with a customer with his leg up, as it were, and you can see that, and we can probably circle it for you and give you a little bit of a... And that is the first human being, or pair of human beings, ever photographed. Cool. It's rather wonderful, isn't it?
How long does it take doing them shoes then?
Yeah, I know, it's surprising. It was a 10-minute exposure, in fact, a 10-minute exposure. It was in 1838. That's how long ago it was. Wow. And we have a photograph for you, and you have to identify who the person is in the photograph. Who's that?
Is that Bruce Forsyth?
It's not Bruce Forsyth.
In the early years.
It's quite surprising. It's someone you would not imagine there would be a photograph of.
Okay. Can you give us a country? Is it
He's British.
Is it British?
He was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Small, it's a Prime Minister of
but he was
Britain.
from an Irish
Is
family.
it-
Actually, the Duke of Wellington.
Wow.
Duke of Wellington.
Yeah,
Is
the
the Duke- is it
victor
the Duke of
of
Wellington?
Waterloo.
Wellington.
As an old man, he looks surprisingly benign, considering his reputation. But isn't it amazing? There is a photograph of the
had
Duke of
no
Wellington.
idea.
Yeah, it's rather fabulous.
That's just a great picture.
It is actually a lovely picture.
It
isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on to something very, very different. Name something interesting you can do with a slinky.
Well, it's
Well,
a...
you can't untangle it.
That's certainly... Oh, God, I got through so many as a child. It was so upsetting.
It is the most... It was
wasn't
the most... You
Oh.
go to the top of the stairs and you look at this, it's... Oh, no! And then that would be it in your toilet.
We've given you some stairs. In fact, you can take your stairs and your slinky out and
Oh, well,
demonstrate.
there's
There
some
may be
slinkies.
young people in the audience.
You're
who've
going
never
to
had
love
the
this.
You could
excitement.
attach. You could
This
attach
is... I'm
it to
going
your...
back. Look at that!
Yay!
Isn't that fun? They're the best thing.
Oh, dear.
I'm
you may
literally
have
the
pointed it in the
happiest
wrong
man in the
direction.
world.
That is brilliant.
Where did you...
Hey!
So he invented this out of... He was a suspension designer, wasn't he?
He was a naval officer. His name was Richard James, and it was in 1940... It's called the Allen effect.
Just...
No. You don't do it like that. You lift the top.
Somebody go and get him a rally top.
How can you not work a slinky? How can you not do that? Yay!
Imagine giving this to a child now and going, that's it, that's your gift. Happy Christmas.
Whatever
Honestly,
you
we had-
do, don't attach it to your electric jockstrap.
No.
It would
But he
make
didn't
a most
invent it
of-
by accident. He was making clothespins and he invented
He was an American naval officer, and he literally knocked over a spring, and it went for a walk. And
Yeah.
he thought, oh, that's interesting. And so he developed an experiment, and he came up with a slinky. And more than...
Look, to be fair, it was his wife who thought it would make a good toy.
Yes, it's true.
Let us,
And-
let us remember
Yeah,
that sometimes women
absolutely.
get overlooked in these things.
More than 300 million were sold, which
Yeah.
is an incredible number.
all to me, because I kept
Yeah.
breaking them.
Yeah, I know, because they tangle up. Now, if you'll put them away...
Do you mind if I keep the stairs? Because there's a few shelves in the kitchen that I still...
But what we do have is a very extraordinary effect that happens if you drop a slinky, which is that when you let go of it, the bottom does not move. Watch the film and you'll see what I mean. It's actually really astonishing. It's a very peculiar effect. Watch the bottom of the slinky as it actually happens in very high-speed camera. The bottom is completely still. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
That is a really bizarre effect. I can't really explain quite why that happens.
Oh, I bet James May could. No, you see, the thing is... Oh, God.
Is there a use for this discovery?
But maybe Jason's idea of crossing it with the Heidelberg electric jockstrap may result in a really quite remarkable experience.
You'll see me on the next series of Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
I have jettisoned wantonly, but it hasn't hit the floor.
It is a great phrase, wantonly to jettison, isn't it? It really is marvellous. Anyway, now we've got more toys to play with, so put the slinky away. I'm going to ask you, basically, this simple question. Why are jerrys better than flimsies?
Jerry.
When we say a jerry, there are jerry cans. Jerry cans.
Yeah.
Jerry cans. And what were jerry cans?
But it's a petrol. It's a thing that was used in the war, wasn't it?
By whom?
Well, presumably by the Germans.
But we eventually used them, but firstly by the Germans. And we had something else called the flimsy. And unfortunately, the flimsy was absolutely cack.
We only won the war by nicking all their ideas.
Yeah, on the left is a jerry can, and there on the right is a flimsy. And General Auchinleck, who was the predecessor of Montgomery in the 8th Army, actually said this about the flimsy. He said, the flimsy in ill-constructed containers for carrying fuel, he said, leaked 30% of its fuel between base and consumer, with huge consequences in lost lives, battles and shipping. So British soldiers basically spent their life trying to steal the jerry can, to the extent the Germans started booby-trapping them because they knew that the British wanted to steal them because they were the most desirable object. The jerry can, I have 2 of them for you. They are absolutely astonishing, incredible inventions. Basically, they're a single weld like this. They have this fabulous cap. They have an inner lining, which means they can carry water or petrol. They have this thing opens, what's called a donkey dick comes out. He's nicknamed Donkey Dick. But rather cleverly...
It's been a hell of a show for me.
Yeah. But even, I mean, they have this little indentation here. What do you think that does?
Strength.
It strengthens it, but it also, in heat,
allows it to
allows it to expand. And the handles are absolute genius, because if you have 2 empty ones, you can hold them together using the handles. One here, I'm going to stand up like so.
Standing.
So you simply hold them like that using that. But also, when you're holding it, you hand it to someone else, there's a handle. You simply take it like that. And they are...
Getting the donkey stick out now,
almost
sir.
perfect. You won't be able to, it's really, really stiff.
It's amazing. It's a real talent.
How do I do it?
I don't know how you do it.
It's amazing.
But it is genuinely
love
one of the most brilliant designs ever made. It's never been
They
improved.
still lost.
They still did lose. One of the reasons they lost is that by the end of the war, we produced 21 million of the jerry cans. And I will quote President Roosevelt, who said, without these cans, it would have been impossible for our armies to cut their way across France at a lightning pace, which exceeded even the German blitzkrieg of 1940. So basically, we won the war by stealing the Germans' jerry can, because the movement of vehicles, and therefore of petrol, is absolutely essential in war.
So is that where the word flimsies come from, that?
No, flimsy existed as it were.
Oh,
They were
okay.
called flimsies because they were just so shite.
Oh, I see, right.
Were just square metal boxes that rotted and leaked and were useless.
Okay.
And these designs were, I mean, almost every aspect of them was quite... And not only that, they floated, which the British ones didn't do. So the Germans could drop them at sea or on rivers. I mean, they were kind of the iPod of the day. They were just the most perfect design imaginable. On the other hand, what's the least promising invention in history?
Something that people thought wasn't going to be...
least welcomed and then turned out to be most successful.
It wasn't the energy-saving light bulb, because that's an invention that, for me...
Yeah, but that's been forced upon us.
And it's
Yeah,
the worst invention.
It's not...
It's like, I need this room to be light, in about an hour.
I leave them on 24 hours a day so that I can read a book when I go to bed at night.
This was invented by a man called Sylvan Goldberg. But you wouldn't think of it as an invention, and yet I suppose it is, and it's the shopping trolley. And men thought it was effeminate to walk around a shop pushing a trolley, and women thought it was an insult to their ability to carry a basket. Perfectly capable of carrying baskets, I don't need to do it. So he invented it in 1938, and for 2 years he paid people basically just to wander around supermarkets or the early shops wheeling them, so people got used to the sight of it. And then he died in 1984.
Someone must have paid her to wear that outfit.
Sylvan Goldberg died in 1984, worth $400 million.
Wow, that's a lot of pound coins.
He kept the pound, yes.
It's a lot of clogged canals.
It's a lot of clogged canals as well, yes. So it did work. Another example was bubble gum, which was invented by a man called Frank Fleer in 1906. He called it blibber blubber. But unfortunately, his particular recipe meant that once the bubble had burst, you had to use turpentine. Which is in itself toxic anyway.
That's brilliant.
So have you ever got any form of gum, particularly nicotine gum,
in your
no,
hand?
on the screen of an iPhone?
Oh, no. Is that...
That's what I want an invention for, I've just decided. If you get the gum on the front of an iPhone, there is no way of removing it. Hammer, chisel.
There must be an app.
Yeah.
The nicotine gum removal app.
Very good. Very good. And I think Sandy would approve of this as well. We ought to hear it from Mary Anderson, 1903.
Mary Anderson.
Do you know about Mary Anderson?
I do. Mary
Tell
Anderson.
me about her.
She invented the windscreen wiper.
Yeah, absolutely. You are a fountain.
wow.
Well, what I love about that is that it had to be a woman who invented the windscreen wiper, because up until then, men have been going, "Don't be silly, dear, I can see perfectly well." Of course it was a woman.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, she noticed tram drivers, streetcar drivers, having to stop every now and move snow away, and she invented it in 1903, and really there just weren't enough cars. And by the time it was useful, her patent had elapsed, so she made not a cent from it.
Well, it's the same as Dorothy Levitt, who invented the rear-view mirror. So women enabled you to see where you were going and where you'd been.
They did it to do their lipstick. Come on.
Dorothy Levitt recommended that you take your compact mirror and place it on the dash so that you could see behind you. And she was the person who invented the rear-view mirror. But again, she didn't make any money out of it because there was no patent.
Oh, well, I'm very impressed you knew about Mary Anderson, and we should indeed pay, due courtesy to her. Anyway, what about the dry ear dryer? It's a machine to dry your ears. OK. Drying your ears, it says, has never been simpler or more effective. The device blows hot air into your ear, although the instructions advise you to dry your ears first with a towel.
Is this
a real invention?
All you need is a tube.
Modern,
You just need a tube.
Yeah. Or a hairdryer would do the job.
You don't even need that, Stephen. You just need a tube.
But most people have hairdryers.
Yeah, but a tube. Just a tube.
Would do it. I know, you're right. Anyway, here's a marvellous question. What was wrong with the first sound recording device?
Didn't work.
Didn't have any speakers.
Well, it was that it recorded sound perfectly well.
But you couldn't play it back?
Yes, you couldn't play it back. What happened was a man called Martin Val, he was a Frenchman. He used burnt soot and it registered sound waves
But they
on
sort
it.
of scratched it out, didn't they?
But recently, it was reverse engineered, and engineers managed to get the sound back of him singing "Au Clair de Lune."
Is that the thing they played on Radio 4 and Charlotte Green cried with laughter?
Charlotte Green. Would you like to hear that moment?
I do know. It was one of my favourite moments of all
Because unfortunately, she had to
time.
announce the death of Abbie Mann, and she couldn't help corpsing, bless her. So you want to listen to this, because you'll hear the oldest ever sound recording, plus the unfortunate event that followed.
American historians have discovered what they think is the earliest recording of the human voice, made on a device which scratched sound waves onto paper blackened by smoke. It was made in 1860, 17 years before Thomas Edison first demonstrated the gramophone, and featured an excerpt from a French song, Au Clair de la Lune. The award-winning screenwriter Abbie Mann has died at the age of 80. He won an Academy Award in 1961 for Judgment at Nuremberg. Excuse me, sorry. Abbie Mann also won several Emmys, including one in 1973 for a film which featured a police detective called... The character on whom a long-running TV series was eventually based.
Charlotte Green's great contribution.
There's somebody in the corner of the room going... We haven't got it, we haven't got it. We're going to have to go with the item anyway. I'll do it. I know what it sounds like. They'll never know. Oh, don't laugh.
This one you could record into it, but then nobody could hear it.
Yes,
Can we not just get that for like Jedward? Like for their next album? They have a lovely day out, that's fine.
Everything would be perfect.
Nobody has to suffer.
You're right. You're absolutely right. OK, so now we're going to go for a jolly jape, and I have an extraordinary pendulum swing that my friends here are going to bring on, and I'm going to show you a remarkable action. It's handmade by our chief science elf, Will Bowen, who's a bit of a genius, and it's an effect that was first noted by Galileo. That's how old it is. But you don't see many of these, and I think it would make a great executive toy. So I'm going to lay this down here and push it and let go. And it will start to go, and it's rather beautiful. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? But it's better than that, because then it starts to get a bit ordinary. And then it starts to move into a different sort of rhythm. And then they start to get in step, like that. Ooh, look at that. They're starting to move together again. But then something really amazing happens as well, which is they go back into their wave formation, which is about to happen. It's a whole long process, but it's utterly predictable, and it follows very specific laws of physics. And here it goes back into its waves again. Look at that. I think that's pretty amazing, isn't it? And it will carry on doing that, as you can see. It will carry on going through those cycles behind us. And it's a principle, as I say, that Galileo worked out. The central bob, it makes 60 swings in a minute. The one to its left does 59 in 60 seconds, and so on. It means after 1 minute, they're all back to where they started. And it doesn't matter how far you push a pendulum, it still takes the same amount of time to swing from one side to the other. And it's using that makes it go in and out of sync in these different ways. There it is, it's the Galileo pendulum. And wouldn't it make a great executive toy? Well, that's all the inventions we've got time for this week, except, of course, for the scores. And believe me, these are not invented, much as though people may believe it. The scores are rigorously and scientifically worked out. And in first place, with an extraordinary plus 13, is Sandy Toksvig! Wow! And only 10 points behind in second place with plus 3, Jeremy Clarkson! Well, what's happened? And very impressive from Jason Manford with plus 2! Wow! I'm afraid the smallest swing of the pendulum, minus 8, Alan Davis! And that's all from Jason, Jeremy, Sandy, Alan and me. Thank you. Be extremely kind to each other forever, and good night.